Welcome to the Real Freedom Podcast with your host, Ryan Weimer. Today I've got Cory with me. Cory?
Excited to be back.
Yeah. So we're going to go through our Q1 2025 results for this episode. What do you think? How did we do?
Made some progress.
Okay.
Got a lot of things to work on.
Okay.
That's a good start.
So we've done these in the past. How is today going to be slightly different than those?
Well, I think we're going to take and look kind of year over year as well, which we haven't had the data sometimes to look at. And so it's helpful to be able to now have Salesforce actually know what the data is and how we can grow into the future.
Yeah. So just as on a high level thing, I actually wanted to talk about this. The amount of foundational pieces that you need as a company before you get to that next revenue level, I underestimated all those.
Me too.
So now I can confidently say we are in a prime position to explode from here, right? Where really all we need are talented people. We have the data, we have the process, we have the operations people in the right seats, right? And now we just hired how many salespeople in the last month?
6
salespeople in the last month.
Doubled the staff.
We doubled the team in a month.
More than doubled, actually. But
Are we crazy? Do we have a screw loose?
Well, always. But,
Okay.
But that's what's required right now for us to achieve the goals we want to achieve.
Yeah. So let's talk first. What are some of the foundational pieces that you've underestimated that we needed? And what I mean by that is, like a year ago, us thinking, we're ready to take off. We're ready to go from 2 million to 3.5 million. But that wasn't really the case, was it?
This is such a big topic.
Yeah.
Some of the biggest pieces that we've added in the last year, amazing operations manager that has a depth of knowledge for transactions. And that's really helped us out. What it takes to onboard people appropriately. We'd been doing it. We're doing it at a much higher level now. And that's just through a lot of trial and error and work. Getting the systems in the back end to actually know what our data is, what we're trying to communicate, how we're giving people the simple task to do, but also keeping them accountable. And then the other piece is the marketing piece, which that doesn't get dialed in until you break a few things along the way.
Where do you think we've made the biggest strides in accountability of our people? Because I think this is a sensitive topic.
Yeah.
If you're like making your first hire or second hire, or you're thinking about hiring, right? And like you're communicating what the expectations are, but it's funny how many times people actually hear one thing or don't hear what you're saying at all. And so what is that like about like first setting the right expectations and then holding people accountable to those? I know this could be its own podcast.
This is its own podcast. And by the way, the great plug for the Layla Hormozi podcast, because she has a lot of content on this and is somebody who does it at a high level. So great place to go for that. Here's the learning experience that I feel like I've been through. I assume that they heard what I said. That's a fallacy. And then when I ask them about it later, they repeat back 50 to 30% of it correctly. We would even have people that we would bring on, and I would ask them a month in, what is your expectation for what you're supposed to do in a day? Which I thought it was incredibly clear. It was the same number of contacts, appointments set, and talk time that we talk about every single day. And the numbers I got, none of them matched from every single person. I had somebody be like, 1 appointment in a day, and someone said 4 appointments in a day. I was like, what is your personal minimum standard for what you're going to hold yourself to? Wildly different. And it's not that the person who said 4 was ever actually getting 4. And the person who said 1 was always exceeding 1.
So let's actually go into that. What for a lead manager? So leads come in, right? And the lead manager is the first point of contact for these leads. They reach out to them, learn more about their situation. And if they fit our criteria, then they set an appointment for acquisitions to go meet with that seller and go through their different options. And hopefully it's a good fit and we sign that contract. But for a lead manager, very phone heavy role, right? They're talking to leads all day, every day. What are our expectations daily for them?
So our expectations are that if they are past their first 90 days, then what they're doing is they're scheduling 3 appointments. They have 45 two-way conversations, and these can either be text conversations or calls, but you have to communicate with the homeowner, or 120 minutes of talk time. And it's an or, because sometimes you don't get the 3 appointments set and you talk to people all day and they're just not the right people. That's great. Pass them along. And the next day, we had a guy last week who stacked 5 appointments in one day, and he'd stacked consistently 2, 3, 5. And then he had a day where he had 7 appointments that were run, all from the things he had done that week and scheduled. And you don't get that without the consistency, and you don't get that with the tracking. And so I think the thing you're maybe getting at is that it was maybe Q3 or Q4 CG that we watched a presentation, a couple of presentations centered around the same thing, which is, does your team know what they're doing? And how do they measure themselves? And so then we adopted a stoplight report, very simple Google sheet that at the end of every single shift, they have to fill out their end-of-day metrics. And we were doing this previously because it allowed us to track it better for ourselves. And then we had them start reading off their metrics every single morning, so they are accountable for what they accomplish.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to see if they're in yellow, if they're in green, if they're in red every single day. And people who we've brought on the team that don't like to be held accountable really don't like to see their numbers in red. And then they'll try to make excuses about it. And it's a very quick litmus test for, is this person the right mindset? And then we need to have conversations based on that when we're starting to see it.
So what you're describing is literally every morning.
Every morning.
You do a screen share with our whole team. We have
Yes.
a daily all hands.
Yes.
The whole team calls into a Zoom call.
Mm-hmm.
And we spend 5 minutes where each lead manager says, I set this many appointments, I talked to this many people, and I had this much in talk time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can very clearly see it's color coded, right?
Yes.
You can very clearly see it's green
Mm-hmm.
if they hit it, it's yellow if they got close.
Yellow would be more than 80%.
More than 80%, okay. And then it's red if they were
If they were below 80%.
if they're below 80%. Okay.
And then if they get over 100%, it's super green.
Yeah. Now, in this, it's very important. In this call, we're not going, hey, Ed, your numbers suck. Like, why are you all red across the board? No, we're just going, each person has to say where they were, and then we roll right to the next. We save those other conversations and those performance conversations typically for a one-on-one setting.
That's correct. We've done it the other way. Doesn't usually go well, because then you have one person who feels called out in the middle, and then their productivity sucks the rest of the day, and it kind of sucks the life out of the rest of the team.
Yeah.
So through some trial and error, we found that it's better to have those conversations, especially toward the end of the evening or first thing in the morning after we go through the metrics, to be like, you just saw your stats next to everybody else's. What's going on?
Yeah. And I do think there's a time and place to call the team out, because people need collectively, because people need a kick in the ass from time to time. So if you're finding your team is consistently yellow or red, which we have, that's the biggest indication that you probably have a people problem, right?
Yeah.
And I know that you've come a long way here specifically.
Yeah. It's a lot of failure along the way to start to get better at this skill set, because it is a skill set at the end of the day.
But it takes a few A players in the role for you to see what's possible.
It has.
Right?
Oh, absolutely.
So I think I've been a little bit better at that, because I actually made a lot of calls, and so I know what's actually possible in a day, right? And if you don't have that background, it does take somebody, an A player in the role, to like set the bar for everybody else on like, holy crap, what if we could do that every day? So I don't want to dive too much deeper into that. I actually think that that's a great topic for a different podcast on like tactically, how do we do that, and how do those conversations go, some different talk tracks you can use with your team. But
I want to make one other quick point.
Sure.
When you start to get pushback on that from the people, that's a clear sign that there's a culture fit issue within your team, within your company. And so be very cognizant of that. And I'll say we've had people who have been top performers who hate this. They'll love to talk about it when they crush the day, and then make excuses when they don't.
Ego.
It's ego.
Yeah. So that's the first sign of being non-coachable, which in our business, the number one thing we look for, of course, is cognitive ability that we've talked about in the past, right? How fast can they learn? But second to that, I think, is coachability. So we have a saying, it's skill, not will. You can't coach somebody will. You can't want it more than somebody wants it for themselves. And that's a really shitty thing when you come to that realization where you have people like that, because then you have the daunting work of replacing them, which takes months.
Yes.
And lots of money.
And lots of money.
Yeah.
And time.
Yeah.
And time out of the business, doing other things. Yeah.
Okay. let's dive into Q1 2025.
Oh boy.
What were our targets and where did we end up?
So framing here is really important. We set some ambitious targets.
Yeah.
We set a target in Q1 this year to achieve roughly half of what we did all last year in revenue. So we had set our target for revenue, and I'll go basically from the lagging metrics to the leading metrics here. So, and this is how we actually do our breakdowns as well. We're just about to do our VTO session to start planning out the next quarter.
Yeah.
What's the revenue, and then how do we get there? Let's break it down step by step. Revenue. Our target was to hit $1 million in the first quarter. We got 485,000. So roughly 49% of that.
That's not very good
It's not very good.
compared to our target.
Not compared to our target. If we look back year over year, that's over 200,000 more in revenue that we made in Q1 this year than we made in Q1 last year. So again, depends on the framing.
Sure.
Where we wanted to be, no. And we can talk about the reasons behind that. The biggest reason behind that is staffing.
Yeah.
And people, getting the right people on the bus. And sometimes, as we found, if you have somebody who comes in and does well, and then they start to have one foot out the door, it may take you a moment to realize that. And then you go back and you look at the data, and it's very evident when they decided that they were 1 foot out the door, because all of a sudden the activity level decreased. And you're like, yep, that's about the date.
Yeah.
Even if that person didn't leave on that day.
Right.
Let's talk about average deal size actually next.
Sure.
So average deal size, our target was to get up to 28,000. All of last year, 27,000 and some change is where we were at. 28.5, that's where we hit. Bolstered by one really big deal. However, that really was a bellwether to help get us up to that 485 in revenue.
Yeah, but here's the thing about big deals, right? You make your own luck. So like the more marketing you do, the more people you meet with, the more opportunities you have at a grand slam. This is not a secret.
No.
The better you are at sales, like that's the thing, right? Is it's like, and we've been caught into this trap. We've had this conversation of like, yeah, but if we didn't have that huge deal, then what would it have been for the quarter? And it's like, no, we historically, if you look, we do about one deal that size, which it was a $132,000 wholesale deal.
Yes, massive.
$132,000 wholesale deal. From the time we got it under contract to got $132K in our bank account was 2 weeks, I think, or 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, it was 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
It was one of our faster transactions this year,
Killer
actually.
deal, right? But that happens
with a happy client.
Yes, very happy, who's going to sell us more of their properties.
Yes.
Which that's its own mindset shift for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But point is, we do one of those deals like once a quarter, right? And so when we up our marketing and we meet with more people, it's probably going to become twice a quarter. And then it could become 5 times a quarter, right? And so
yeah, it should become monthly at some point.
And so you have to like, you got to get out of your current way of thinking, and you have to think about this stuff in terms of future state. Like you said, we can look at the revenue number and we can say, oh, that was way short of our target. But the whole point of setting ambitious targets isn't a pass fail. It's, are we trending in the right direction? Are we making progress?
Absolutely. Let's talk about making progress then.
Yeah.
So we had, again, ambitious revenue targets. We actually had, in January, our biggest contract signed month in company history at 19. We ended up the quarter at 39. So that means only 20 signed contracts over the next 2 months. That was off pace, not what we expected, not what we were trending towards. And part of that, again, has been a bit of staff turnover. And part of that has been whenever we have people come on board, they go through a cycle where all of a sudden they'll start to do really well. They'll focus on the skill sets, just like basketball players who focus on like 3-pointers for a while, get really good, and all of a sudden they can't make a free throw. Same thing. So we've been dealing with some of that growth and learning as a company in a few different ways.
Let's make an important distinction here, though. For me, and we actually haven't talked about this with Tori, so she might get mad at me for phrasing this. But for me, turnover is completely different than hiring the wrong person. What I mean by that is if somebody is making it over 90 days with you, and in our business, we have a 30, 60, 90-day training period, right? So that's what I'm referring to is if they pass the training period and then we lose them, that's turnover. If we let somebody go due to performance in the first 30 days, 60 days, or even 90 days, or they self-select out because it's not the right fit. They thought it was going to be something different, our standards, whatever the case is. That's just we hired the wrong person. We've had a way more not hiring the right people than we've actually had staff turnover, like
Absolutely.
a disproportionate amount. So like, I think it's important to say, yes, we've had some staff turnover, but it's been a lot more of just not hiring the right people. And so that is the reason why we're not quite to the level that we want to be, but also illustrates exactly what our solvable problem is. We know exactly what the key is. And that's why we brought six people on in the last month.
And put a ton of effort into the hiring side and vetting people to get a higher quality candidate in the door.
Yeah. And this is the fun part too, is like every quarter when you're investing in more people and you start to get another A player and you start to spend a little bit more in marketing. Well, now all of a sudden that B player that you hired 6 months ago, you're raising the floor and the standards of the company. That person may no longer be a fit for no other reason than you are on a different trajectory than what they want for themselves. Okay. So when you're growing, staff turnover isn't all a bad thing. Like, you need different people to get you different places.
Absolutely. And I had a conversation at CG December of last year about somebody who had come into an organization. And before he did that, he actually asked the CEO, he's like, is it okay with you if I come on, is it okay if we have 100% staff turnover? And he said he kind of shocked the CEO when he asked him that. But he's like, if you want to grow this where I think we can grow it to, it's going to be really uncomfortable. And a lot of the people that are here probably aren't going to be the ones that are with us then. And they had to come up and say yes or no to that. And he said in about a year and a half, it was close to 100% staff turnover with a few people that were still there because they changed and they elevated the standards.
Yeah, that feels pretty crappy to do, I think.
It was really uncomfortable.
Very, very uncomfortable, yeah. Actually, could you get vulnerable a little bit here? I know you had a conversation with Matt Bailey, who shout out to Matt Bailey and Collective Genius, on a lot about our hiring struggles and like finding the right people in the sales team. And I'm curious how that conversation went. I actually haven't asked you about this yet, but in talking about what kind of company structure, revenue goals do you have? How did that conversation go? Why'd you call Matt?
Yeah, so actually the conversation was really prompted more around what are you doing for hiring? Because right now they've got people on the team and he's like, how do I become a better sales manager?
Okay.
And so that was really the premise of the conversation because for them, they're looking to potentially bring on some new staff. They have a really lean organization and they spend a lot on marketing. So they've got a killer return on ad spend. To level up their team with their ad spend, like the solvable problem for them is bringing on more people at a high level. And they've had some people there that sounds like have been there for a while. And so like that was the conversation we had, which is like, yeah, we've just been kicked in the teeth when it comes to staff. I'll use the word turnover, but just hiring a lot of the wrong people.
Yeah.
And it sucks. And it sucks to go through and like think you're pouring into somebody who's going to be the right fit. And then all of a sudden you see the character trait that you're like, I didn't know that one was there. Okay. And so the way each company, each person's different. The way we have chosen to try and build this by focusing on the people first is really painful. And that was what most of our conversation was about. It was like, I have felt an immense amount of discomfort and pain going through the hiring and firing process and learning to hold people more accountable because he also comes from an engineering background. And it's like, great, put it on the spreadsheet, do the thing on the spreadsheet. And that just doesn't work with most humans, especially in sales.
Not salespeople.
And so that was how our conversation went. And we're like, do you want to do that? Do you want to be the person that calls them out at the end of the day when they're not performing? Or do you want to be the person that 6 months later has that uncomfortable conversation because no one made money?
So in that explanation there, you said spending money and time on people first, as opposed to what?
The other business model you could choose is to keep a really lean organization and pump all the money into marketing, knowing that you're going to overspend probably what you can actually capture and optimize.
And for the listeners, like what kind of marketing?
Yeah, so let's say you're investing in PPL, pay-per leads, pay-per-click. Maybe you get on radio because it's the new sexy thing, or maybe you get on TV. These can all be really big budget ads, especially depending on the market size you're in. And so you could spend $5,000, $50,000, $100,000 on each of these channels per month.
Right.
If you choose to.
So you can spend money getting homeowners
Leads.
to pick up the phone and
Yep.
call in and say, hey, I want to sell my
Yeah,
house.
you can spend a ton of money, as much money as you want to on these things. Then you have the other challenge, which is how do I convert them? What does my sales funnel look like? Am I doing enough follow-up? And if you choose to invest in the marketing first, you will get leads. Assuming you're not blowing money on maybe a bad provider, but you should be able to get leads. Then the question is, what do you do with them? And if you either don't have the closers in place, or you're not the closer yourself, or you don't have a team to do follow-up, what's going to happen is you're going to inundate yourself with leads. You're going to lose deals. You're going to spend a lot of money, and it's another way to run yourself into the ground very easily. The biggest thing, I don't know if you want to comment on this, most of the people that I see that are either solopreneurs or with a small, lean team were good at closing deals themselves. And so that really helped because then they were the person in the seat doing the thing. Managing somebody to do that is a completely different skill set.
100%. Yeah. And I always talk about this, but like hiring, when you make the decision, because that's what it is we're talking about is like, do I spend money on people first or marketing first?
Mm-hmm.
And when I make that decision, you have to spend money to watch somebody fail. And then you have to hop in and close extra contracts and extra deals, generate more revenue to make up for that.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you've doubled the amount of things that need to get done and halved the amount of revenue coming in. That's what it's like hiring a person for like 6 months till you get a return on that usually.
Mm-hmm.
But how I know, bringing this full circle back to our results, that we're making progress is we have significantly shortened the time gap from getting a return on a person. So before it was 6 months when you're hiring for the first time or second or third time or first year, right? You're investing all that time, energy, and resources into them. And then like they're slowly building up, right? Now we had a sales guy in his first 60 days that signed 8 contracts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that time has significantly shrunk. And that is a real data-driven metric to be able to see and show and prove to yourself that you're ready to bring on more people, because now you have the training process where somebody can really hit the ground running.
And some of that you can even outsource. Like, let's say you become part of like the ramp training, which they do an incredible job, and they've got a good library there, and
Which is sales training.
Yeah. Now, the thing I would say to that is you have to force your people to do it. And like you have to give them the space and the time to do that, not just call, because otherwise what's going to happen is they're going to see it as a thing out there that just gets put by the wayside because everything else is more important and a higher priority.
Yeah. I would say by forcing, you mean
It's working with them to make it a priority and schedule time.
right.
So
like
that way
block out the time for them.
Block out the time for them, work with them on a schedule, make sure that they have time to work on themselves.
Right.
I mean, just to share, right now, our top performing lead manager, the conversations we're having is like, okay, when are you doing this? He's like, oh, well, I'm an hour ahead. I'm in Central Time. And so I block a half an hour out before we start our morning meeting, which is 8:30 Mountain. So it'd be 9 o'clock his time. He's like, I do a half an hour of just self-education every morning. It's no shock that you're doing the best and you're going the fastest because you spend the time to do that.
Exactly. But those are the kind of, that's a really strong indicator that has a potential to be an A player, right? If somebody is taking their free time, and I know you use the word force, but like if someone is actually not being forced to do anything and they want to consume content that makes them better in their spare time, you definitely have a winner. You have somebody with a growth mindset that's going to produce and going to do big things.
Oh, absolutely. And I think maybe we've gotten a little off the metrics topic, but that's great for this podcast. Those are the leading signs. So for someone like that, the contracts are going to lag. The contracts are going to lag the skill set. They're going to lag the activity, some of which might just be luck during the first month or two if they haven't been in this role or done this industry before. And sometimes we'll have somebody come in and they get like a couple of contracts in their first month, and we're like, oh my God, this guy's great. And then month 2, they get 0. And we're like, oh, no, they just got lucky.
You know what I've noticed is like every time we have one of these quarterly review podcasts or conversations, it always comes back to people. Literally we talk about hiring and all that stuff, but there's a reason why. It's because it is the thing. You know what I mean? So I think for the rest of this podcast, let's steer away from that and let's try to get into some tactical things.
Sure.
But that is the reality, right? Is like you are one A player away from getting to the next level. That's all it takes. Let's jump into the next one. What's the next?
Yeah. So the next one, we signed 39 contracts. We look at new appointments attended. So these are not people who were already in our follow-up from 2024 or any prior time. These are just new appointments attended. So 213 new appointments attended this quarter. It's a decent amount. We scheduled 309. Now, when I say that, it's because there is not 100% of the appointments we schedule we're actually attending. Some of these are proactively canceled because we had newer people on the board. That's about 69% of our appointments scheduled actually were attended, which is shy of what our target is of 80. Yet, given the people we had on board, probably 30 or 40 of those were just manager cancellations because they didn't know what they didn't know yet.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question is I know we don't track this. Maybe we should. But when in the first 90 days when people are getting trained up, they set bad appointments, right? Or they set appointments with people that don't fit the criteria.
They get excited. They're like, you want to sell?
Yeah.
Can I come to your house now?
Yeah. I don't care about anything else that you said. Let's schedule an appointment right now. So if you remove those, where does that put our rough cancellation
let's
rate?
say we added 30 or 40 onto that, that would put us about 78%.
Okay.
So we'd be pretty close at that point, 70 to 80. And we put a lot of work and energy into training the team. And a lot of that has to come down to the uncomfortable asking for the close early, asking if there's anyone else there that needs to be present and not taking the first answer of like, no, my wife doesn't really need to be there. I'm the decision maker.
Can we talk about CRMs?
Sure.
Which CRM do we use and why? The reason that I want to actually talk about this topic, this is one of the biggest questions out there. And it grinds my gears a little bit, to be totally honest with you, because when people are asking you what CRM do you use, what do you hear?
I hear it's the system. It's not the action.
Right. Like my focus should be, I have the wrong system. That's why I'm struggling. Right. When I hear that question, that's why it bothers me, because I actually don't even like getting into this subject. But if you are truly at the level where your CRM matters, which if you're doing less than 5 deals a month, you just need a place to store your notes and to tag leads and to set appointments, right? Like that, for me, you don't need all the bells and whistles of everything else.
Yeah, so we use Salesforce to answer your question.
Yeah.
And the reason we use that is because we work through Left Main, who has a platform already built out for real estate investment. And with the number and sheer volume of leads we have, it is otherwise chaos. And so I think a big part of it comes back to how many leads do you have in your damn database? And if you've got 200 leads, like we had somebody tell us yesterday, like you don't need Salesforce. You need an Excel sheet. Or you need like a mojo that basically says, is it warm or hot? That's it. But 200 leads is nothing. Now, we have over 9,000 just in Salesforce, not what's in some of our other outbound dialing systems. Okay. What's the likelihood that any rep can follow up with 9,000 records? Zero. Without some type of system in place. And that's where it becomes helpful, is at scale.
At Offer Now Idaho, we're looking to hire A players to run our organization and help us grow our business. But in what other field can you be talking to people on a regular basis that need help? From losing everything, but that is finally in enough pain where they're ready to change their life. We're out there meeting with these people that need our help. Nobody else is there.
Some of the things that I'm honestly most proud of are the conversations where we had a tangible impact and didn't get the deal. I know that doesn't add to the bottom line, but it does help in reciprocity and putting goodwill out in the world. I was also an engineer, and I was so many levels removed from having a direct impact on an individual that if you've never had that experience and you're saying, well, I want to be able to look at my family members and said, here's the impact I've had, this is a position will allow you to do that. No matter what seat you're in, you can have a direct impact, and it is such a cool feeling that I didn't appreciate until it happened.
Right now, we have a $3,000 referral program. If you know somebody that's looking for a new role, we will pay you $3,000 once that person is hired by us and they hit their 90-day mark. So if you know of anybody that's looking for a new job or looking to change their life, shoot me a DM at @RealRyanWeimer on Instagram.
Let's get it.
So let's take people through our CRM journey briefly, because actually where I'm going with this is I want to talk about the automations and auto texts that we implemented that really helped with our appointment cancellation rate and appointment set. But let's talk first about what CRM did we start with, and then what did we do?
Well, we started effectively with Mojo,
which is a dialer.
Mojo is a dialer that you can then, it creates a funnel, and I'll describe it just like I'm going to coach on it today when we brought new people on.
Yep.
You've got lists, very top end of the funnel. You put them into a group, which says, yes, I talked to the homeowner. Here's where their status is and where they're ready to sell. And then from there, you can tag them as, are they ready to set an appointment? Are they hot? Are they warm? What's their timeline? You just tag them as a group, and then you can go and call that group, and you can set follow-up dates and times and reminders and put notes in. Good for a very small database.
Right.
Terrible when you want to view, okay, how many people do you have in your queue? Who are you following up with? Who did you meet with 2 months ago or 4 months ago that you need to call? I don't know. They're in the one group that says appointment set. How many people are in there? 800. Okay, how are you going to go find them? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's how our conversations used to go.
Yeah.
And so then we transitioned over to a Salesforce. I think you used the term like we rented a Ferrari, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked with Integrity First Home Buyers, and they basically would license out their version of Salesforce, which is built on Left Main again. And they came with a lot of the bells and whistles. When I say that, it came with automated cadences or sequences of text messages, of emails that would go out, of tasking reminders to say, hey, rep, you met with this guy. Did you follow up with him 2 days later and give him a call?
So basically,
with all of that in the background, but we didn't have any ownership over actually what was sent.
Right. So basically, we paid them to upload all of our data from Mojo, migrate it into an already like working Salesforce thing. So we didn't have to do a ton of tinkering with it. Now we actually did end up having to learn it and do a bunch of tinkering, which was a lot of your fun that we went through. But when we did that transition, it was so painful. Like there was a period of 2 or 3 months where we were working out of both systems at the same time, because we were like, I can't find so-and-so in Salesforce, but I can find them in Mojo. And hey, the notes didn't import in, so I can't tell the last conversation that we talked about. And oh my God, it was a nightmare.
You were just pulling your hair out and you're like, why can't I find anything? I'm like, I don't know. It's in here, I promise.
But that's why wait as long as you can before you upgrade systems, because that is a huge undertaking, and you don't need Salesforce with all the bells and whistles. I promise you, that's not the reason why you're doing less than 5 deals a month. That's not, your CRM is not the reason that you're not doing that. So put it off. So we leased the Ferrari. We have Integrity First Home Buyers Salesforce system. And then what happened?
We got to the point where we realized that we wanted more automation, more things that were unique to our business. And it was not going to be compatible with renting the Ferrari, because all of a sudden we wanted to change it up. And it doesn't work well on a rented model. So
like what? What's an example?
Yeah, let's change up our text cadence.
Okay.
Well, we couldn't do that because all the cadences for all the companies were the same, out at the same time. Doesn't work well.
By text cadence, you mean just to get really granular?
Yes, yeah, just what is the some people call it a drip. What is like the messaging that's going to go out to each of the homeowners on a scheduled time based on whatever lead status we put them into?
Okay, so let's say we talk to somebody, we tag it as a hot status in Salesforce. That's a hot lead. There's automated texts that go out every 3 days, every 5 days, every 10 days, right? With pre-scripted messages so that our system can actually do some of that follow-up for our reps.
Exactly.
And so then when the homeowner replies, boom, then our lead manager can already follow up with them, and they start engaging in a warm conversation. And that leads to way more appointments. So I wanted to just make sure that the listeners understand that. So we couldn't do that in the old system. So then we switched to our own, right?
There was some of that. It was already coming in, but we didn't have any control over changing and modifying it. And so we switched.
Well, we saw it worked.
We absolutely
big time.
saw
and
it.
How many contracts and deals did we get just from auto text?
I don't have the number on that, but it was a lot. It was so. What had happened is we had all these leads in the database, and all of a sudden we turned it on day one. And day one it was like 250 reply messages. And our lead manager was like going crazy. He's like, I can't even keep up. My phone's just ringing. My computer's like buzzing constantly. So we're doing it a bit more measured now, but we moved over to Left Main Salesforce, which is a great product that they put out. And now we get the opportunity to modify whatever the hell we want,
Right.
which is great and can take a ton of time. And so you have to be really careful because you can build out whatever you want in the system, but then you're not also calling on leads. So it's a yin and a yang. And so what we have now is that same Left Main version that we've then continued to add on to. I mean, things as simple as like, do we have a button that we want to put in for a short sale? Might take us 5 minutes to add. Would have taken us a week and a half to get a response or 2 weeks to get a response previously. Now it's in the system like that. And now we have automated text messages that are going out. I mean, I pulled one up here where we reached out to a prospect named Benjamin, and it was a newer lead that got pushed over by we call them our lead generation professionals or VAs. And the first one goes out immediately right after it comes into Salesforce. No response. Now
What does the first message sound like? Just so
Yeah.
Actually, hold on. Before you read it, let me make sure I clarify that, because I want to make sure like there's people listening to this that have no idea what we're talking about. So our virtual assistants will cold call and text for our outbound leads, right? And so when they qualify a lead and they're like, hey, okay, I think this is a hot lead, boom, they click a button, it shows up in Salesforce as new.
Yes.
Then what happens? They get a text immediately that says what?
So they get a text immediately. And what our current language is hi, and then whoever the name is. So hi, Benjamin. It's Sammy. We just made up a random name. You'd recently connected with my team regarding your home at blank, blank, blank in Whitewater Park Boulevard. This is a good number to text whenever you're ready to talk. That goes out immediately. Hopefully, as soon as possible, our lead manager is then going to triple tap them, call them 3 times in a row, and then send them another text. No reply back for 2 days. Another one goes out. Hey, you spoke with my partner about selling your property. We buy about 10 to 15 properties a month. What questions do you have? So 10 to 15 properties, we're raising credibility. Okay, 5 more days go by, no response. Hi again, Benjamin. Were you wanting to sell before Easter? This is Sammy. So we put in there a holiday because it's tangible. And we get a response back.
On the third try.
On the third try, if you want to buy the house, you would present an offer. Stop sending these stupid texts.
But what I love about that, right, is first of all, the system is sending them out. So that saves a ton of time, right? Secondly, it was on the third one, right? How many people text somebody once and then give up or move on to the next lead because they've got so many things going on. And then that we triggered an emotional response that got us to the truth, which is I'm not a motivated seller.
And it allowed us then to get that text message back in. So now our lead manager can call them again. And one of our lead managers just did this morning. But these happen all the time. These are daily that people are applying back to these now because we've started the process. And so whether it's through like a smarter contact or a lead Sherpa, if you're doing any like outbound texting, this type of drip automation is really effective because people don't always respond to the first one.
Yeah.
But because now it's visible to somebody who is US based that's on our team and we get this response, now we can call them in while they're hot, hopefully have a conversation and move them into the right bucket. Maybe they never want to sell. That's okay. Maybe they want to sell next month. Let's find that out.
Yeah, love it. What else do you like about Salesforce?
Love all the reporting. Now, we didn't have clarity except for, again, having people track it on a Google Sheet, what they did, who they called. And now we can look at almost everything. We can include that with the transaction. So transactions, once we have something signed, how is it progressing? And so it just gave us a ton of visibility. And then it's easy to see now how much stuff we still have to fix.
The delusion when you don't really know your numbers and you don't have a system like a Salesforce that can give you accurate reports on what your numbers are. So how many calls is your team making in a day? What's your talk time? How many leads are you generating on a consistent basis? What's your lead to appointment ratio? What's your appointment cancellation rate? All these things, right? When you actually have a system that measures that for you, I can guarantee you the picture is not going to look better than you thought. It's always going to be worse than you thought. And
Take off the rose-colored glasses.
Yes. So I remember, especially with the sales team, when we had that daily call dashboard when we first got Salesforce, and you could see very clearly, because this is also the thing, right? Is we knew how many calls people were making before, but when it's in a visual representation and everybody, you're keeping score, everybody's on a scoreboard, and you can see who's making calls and who's not, who's really crushing it and who's not. and you share that with the team, all of a sudden it totally levels you up. Yeah, there's a direct correlation with when we got Salesforce and started having these dashboards and sharing them when people left or were terminated, right? Because they were not doing the amount of work needed as everybody else. So absolutely knowing your numbers, and then how that empowers you to make data-driven decisions, to know when you're ready to spend more in marketing, to know what channels to invest marketing into, what marketing channel generates the most appointments, what marketing channel generates the least amount of appointments, what is your cost per appointment or offer made, right? All these things, you're just guessing when you don't have data. Not a way to run a business.
Actually, I'm gonna take a quick moment to talk about and bring this full circle. We talked about the end-of-day reports and going through the stoplight reports in the morning. You and I can see the data. And the comments I would get from people who didn't want to be held accountable is like, you're just having us read off the numbers that you can look at and see. Also, making everyone else go look at those numbers and have it in a scaled manner where you can see who made the most dials, who's done the most talk time. And if you have to look at that and everyone else has to look at it and be like, oh, like, Cory, you've only made 6 dials today by 1:30 and you've only had 1 contact. I'm over here busting my ass. Like, are you carrying yourself? Like, are you bringing the team up with you? But everyone else now knows that, and it's visible. So if you're going to be at the bottom of the scoreboard consistently, how are you going to feel like you're doing? Not good. You're either going to want to raise your level or opt out.
And this is how I want to give you some big props in leveling us up here. We had a situation this last week where one of our lead managers was behind on their targets in their first 2 weeks, right? So in our first 2 weeks, we don't have the same standards as when they're past the training period, the 90-day mark, but they have a slow ramp to get there, right? And he was behind. So what did he do on Saturday? He cranked out like 45 contacts, 260 minutes of talk time. How many dials?
300 and something dials.
On a Saturday.
On a Saturday. He crushed it this
right,
Saturday.
Because the accountability was there, the scoreboard was there, and we got the prior commitment from him of like, hey, you're behind on your targets. What are you going to do? And to see that happen and to somebody take that accountability and ownership means we've hired the right person. And so how did that feel?
Well, I'll just tell you, brought somebody on that is accountable, who does the thing, and then you give them props and congratulate them afterwards, and their response is, well, thanks for holding me accountable. They're like, oh, okay, good. We're on the same page.
But also when we went into that stoplight report this morning and that particular individual got to read off his numbers, the tone in which he said it, you could tell he was fucking proud of it.
As he should have been.
As he should have been. But that's the difference between somebody that thrives in accountability and people that don't. And so I think, like, at least for us, the sad part is the number of people you have to get through to find somebody that truly wants to be held accountable and achieve greatness. They're few and far between. And you get so many more people that don't want that. And that's hard. And you got to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So bringing this full circle, because I think these tangents that we go on are good. They give context. But specifically, the auto texts that we've been able to set up in Salesforce have been an absolute game changer. And when we set an appointment, they get an automated text reminder. 24 hours, they get an automated text reminder in advance of that appointment. That helps with our cancellation rate, right? We have so many less. I drove all the way out to the property 45 minutes and nobody showed up. We used to have quite a few of those. Now we don't have any.
We don't allow it.
We don't allow it.
That's the biggest thing, is we adopted the mindset we weren't going to allow it. What you just said is actually really big. So in addition to the automated text messages that are helping to get leads and nurture them and get them into a warm status, outside of that, the automation to be able to send people reminders, just like when you go to the dentist office and they send you the 10 reminders, it helps. It really helps. The other piece is that we also started sending out automated emails that include a link to our seller credibility packet. We call it our welcome packet, which just says, here's who we are, here's who you're going to meet with. And it's just a little introduction. It's just kind of like a warm feel that this person is going to be credible. You don't have to be a big company to put something together that looks official. Go on Canva and you can do it for free in like probably 10 minutes.
Do you get to see when people open that or no?
I can see when people open it because it's linked in through Salesforce, and and then people sometimes reply back.
Oh, really? I don't have any visibility into that. What do they say?
Normally, it's just
you're ugly.
I've never gotten that one, but normally it's either confirmation of the appointment, or sometimes people less tech savvy will be like, I couldn't open up the packet. It's a hyperlink. And so they're looking for a PDF. Those are usually the two most common responses.
Okay. But regardless, like it shows that people are opening it.
It does.
They are looking
they're
for credibility. Yeah.
with it.
100%. Okay.
And actually, here's the interesting thing. What I don't think I ever shared with you is we actually used to have a much higher email response rate when we were having issues with Salesforce and the packet wasn't attached. I had a lot of people reach out to me. It was probably once or twice a week saying, hey, can you send me that credibility packet? It didn't come through because they wanted to look for it. They were engaged. So it's a little thing, but it really helps.
Yeah. I love that. And again, this comes with scale, but like it's these little 1% chunks that help you build the foundation to then get you to your end goal, which is a $3.5 million target in a year, right? It's these little stupid things that you don't think about. And how many years of work go in prior before you're able to afford the nice CRM, before you're able to build it out the way you want to, before you're able to craft the hyperlink the way you want it to read, right? And like there's just all these steps along the way that you have to do. So what after appointment rate are we looking at for numbers?
When you say after appointment rate?
Oh, I just mean for the rest of our 2025 numbers. What's the next one?
Yeah, so we talked about appointments set, appointments attended. The other thing, and goes back to the urgency that we have with leads. So we broke this up into two different categories because we do focus on them in different amounts of tenacity. Inbound lead is anything we are sending outbound marketing on. So we're paying for radio, we're paying for PPC. They're raising their hand and coming to us because they saw some piece of marketing that triggered them. Outbound means we cold called them, we texted them. They did not reach out to us, we reached out to them. And so we break those up different because one, somebody's raising their hand, and the other one, we're inquiring to see if they're ready. We tracked the number. I had to laugh because the stats are really bad. Number of our outbound leads, cold calls and texts that we just had a message saying, yes, I'm interested in some capacity, that we pass into our CRM. This quarter, we contacted 36% of those within 2 days.
Of outbound?
On outbound.
Oh
36% of those within 2 days.
It's easy for us to get disappointed with this, but this is just a bandwidth issue, right? We've had, 1.5 lead managers?
Yeah, and when you're producing 10 to 20 leads a day and then asking them to do follow-up on the other 9,000 people in our database, like, yes, it is a bandwidth issue. So as we bring on more staff, we're going to, at some point, we had that up close to 75% almost a year ago when we had reduced significantly the amount of outbound leads we were generating because we were trying to qualify them harder, which led to less contracts overall. But we were up about 75%. So now more people, more training, more focus will get back up there.
But you see how, again, bringing this back to building the foundational pieces, like if we're a company that doesn't have significant lead flow or doesn't have enough leads, then our question is, well, how do we generate more leads? You know what I mean? And so you can't hire on people if you don't have leads. So you have to solve these one step at a time. And for 99% of the people listening to this, your problem is lead generation. You're just not generating enough leads. You're not talking to enough people on a daily basis. But once you solve that problem, then you become deserving of adding salespeople. And so for us now, I'm not going to say it's as easy as plug and play, but we literally know that this metric will go up significantly and we'll set a lot more appointments and get a lot more deals just by having a person in that seat to call on them.
Yeah. And just to talk about quantities, because these do matter, it's not like we talked to 36 out of 100 people. This quarter, we generated 1,400 outbound leads. There's the problem. The problem is we didn't have enough people to talk to 1,400 new people in addition to the ones that were already in the system.
Right.
So that was the concern. On the inbound side, again, we're paying a lot of money. These can be $150 to $500 per lead that comes in, depending on the marketing source. We're at 71% of those were contacted within the first 48 hours. And we've had a much lower number, 230 of those this quarter. So more action.
How do we feel about that?
Our target's 80.
Okay.
And some of these come in as web forms. So it's not that everyone comes in saying, yes, I want to sell. Here's my name. Here's my number. Here's my email. Some of them just get to the first step and they submit an address. And then we have to go sleuthing to find the person.
So how do we get to 80?
We get to 80 through urgency and tenacity. So where we fall short is sometimes, especially on like weekends or after hours, there's not enough urgency to get back to a lead. So we're putting some of that automation in place where we can have messages that go out immediately after these come in. So that way there's some level of engagement. And then the other piece is just making sure that it's highlighted with our team. So as we get one more person into it, because right now it's you and me and then 2 other people calling on it. If I'm at an appointment, somebody else is at an appointment, you're off doing, any other part of the business, there's one person. So if they're on a call, maybe they don't get back to them right away.
I want to point out too, it's so funny, like how simple some of this stuff is and how sometimes you as a business owner are your own bottleneck a lot of times and you can't get out of your own way. But like there was a couple weeks ago, I was noticing that we just weren't contacting our inbound leads enough. We'd try like one time right when the lead came in, and then oftentimes we wouldn't try again. And I was like, what in the heck is going on here? Well,
you were really frustrated.
I was really frustrated because we're spending a lot, right? It's not because I'm like, oh, people suck. It's these inbound leads cost a lot of money, right? A lot of times they're $400 or $500 per lead, right? And to just watch them not get contacted means you're just throwing money away.
Just lighting it on fire.
Just lighting it on fire. So the funny part is when you asked the people in our inbound lead channel, why are you not calling on these leads? What was their response?
The response was, oh, well, if I saw that someone else had already talked to them or communicated via text, I just stopped. So if we get one reply back that says, yes, I want to move, they just wouldn't contact me. It's like, oh, they're already in communication. Which
is not how we train it at all, by the way. But how does that get lost? That's why it's so funny, because it's like something that simple.
That was it.
That was it. Once you had the conversation, the next day, immediately, like, it's fixed.
The next day, he scheduled 2 or 3 appointments from that list because he's like, oh, I can call on him now. It's just keeping the rules really simple and then reiterating them a lot.
Yeah.
Way more than you would expect. Way more than we would think.
Well, people need to be reminded more than they need to be taught, right? Like literally we have to tell people to do things anywhere from 3 to 5 times, sometimes 10 times for people to really ingrain it. So one thing that I think we've done a really good job of is we've hammered in that inbound lead training, the same training we reuse and we go over many, many times. In fact, we're probably due for it again, right?
It's about once every 45 days.
You have to do it like that. We didn't used to do that. I used to think if we do a training and then we do like shoot a reminder message in Slack in the days that come, like boom, we're good.
And then we'd pound our fist on the table and say, why aren't they doing it?
Yeah. Disaster.
It never worked.
So you think just from urgency and tenacity, we can get to the 80% mark?
Competition.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's what I was saying. One more person. I think we need one more person to be calling on these. Adds that level of competition and scarcity. Because here's what we noticed is when we only had one person in the channel besides us, the thought was, well, if they set it for us, I get to go on the appointment anyways. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And then if you have somebody who's scheduling that appointment for the other person, it doesn't matter as well. They don't get there, at least the way we have it currently incentivized, it doesn't really make a difference for them. However, you put just two lead managers on the same list at the same time, acting with urgency, and just that one additional person has created, like when we drove the number of outbound leads contacted within 48 hours above 70% last time, just 2 people. But it was 2 people going after it tenaciously because they wanted that lead.
Right.
That was it.
Yeah. Yeah. Competition solves a lot of problems. What else?
So as far as metrics go, those are the big ones. The last one I would say is we tracked for the first time inbound lead to appointment attended. So you mentioned, how do you know when you're going to spend enough money on marketing? So something we picked up from CG that we implemented is that for our inbound leads, they have to prove to us that they are not an appointment. So that's a mindset shift versus an outbound lead. They have to prove to us that they should not be an appointment. And so our target is that 40% of those get converted to an appointment. We ended the last quarter at 42%. So right on where we should be.
So meaning when an inbound lead comes in, that's an automatic appointment.
Bingo.
I don't care what they say. I don't care what their situation is.
Bingo.
They something happened in their life that caused them to fill out a web form about selling and seek somebody to buy their house the unconventional way, right? So that in your mindset, that's an automatic appointment. So that's exactly how we teach it, because you get so many people that are like, I didn't fill out the form. I don't know who filled out the form, and I'm not ready to sell yet, and give me an offer. I want an appraisal. I just want to know what it's worth, right? All of these things just say, I'm just a little bit earlier in my process. If you don't meet with those people, they're going to forget about you. In 2 months, their situation's going to get, there's going to be more pain. They're going to be ready to sell, and then they're going to go sell to somebody else.
Yes.
That's why you have to get in front of these people. So 42%, our target was 40. We're doing a really good job.
Yeah. And then our target on the number of those appointments set to attended. So 30% of our leads is the goal to have appointments run 30% of the appointments, or of the, 30% of the total leads that come into the system as inbound are converted to an appointment that is attended.
And we're talking, just to clarify, gross leads.
Gross leads, total people in the top end of the funnel.
So literally, like, somebody could
3 out of 10 people that come in the top end of the funnel, we need to be meeting with.
Yeah. So every once in a while, we get a lead in Europe on like
that does happen.
Hoople Street in Germany.
Yeah, or Amsterdam.
That counts, right? So we don't distinguish right now currently between gross lead and net lead. It's just,
well, one quick clarification. Sure. If it is out of country or something like that, we do throw those out as unqualified. But anything else, anybody that has a house, that's it.
Just not in Hinkeldorf.
Just not in Hinkeldorf. Exactly. So we're doing well, and we use that as the barometer of, can we take on more capacity? Can we spend more on marketing? Even if our contract conversion's lagging a little bit, if we're getting in front of people, then that's just it just pushes it down the funnel to the problem we have to solve next. But that's really the leading indicator we're looking at to say, are we falling behind? Are we getting too many inbound leads? Do we need to pull back on some of our more expensive marketing until we can get people doing more of the right thing?
Love it. So in closing out this episode for Q1 2025 results, what's one actionable tip you can leave the listeners with on something they need to implement immediately? I'm really putting you on the spot here.
If you're not tracking the number of people that you are talking to on a day-to-day basis and the number of people you're converting to an appointment, you're just leaving money on the table. Do that as like the most basic thing you can, and then everything else, start to track additional stats.
But Cory, I'm scared to do that because deep down I know that I'm not putting in enough action, and I'm scared of what the numbers are going to say.
It's really hard to hold ourselves accountable for most things, right? And what you can find, and we've talked about this before, is that even if you don't maybe achieve the goals that you want on a day-to-day basis, as long as you put in some action, you can stack that up and look at it at the end of the week. And even if your goal was to, I'm going to have 900 minutes of talk time or dial 900 people, and you got to 850, you're still 850 ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think this is the hard truth too, is like, do you want to feel good or do you want to win? Most people want to feel good.
Rose-colored glasses make it a lot easier when you don't have the data to track. We're kind of in this range.
Love it. All right, guys. So that does it for this episode of the Real Freedom Podcast. Hope you got some value. Make sure to like and subscribe below, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.